this on WebEx. Also, Representative Bryce will be with us on WebEx. So with that, welcome committee, welcome conferees, staff. Thank you for being here. And everyone, thanks for putting up with me today. So we're going to go ahead and, yeah. So with that, Jenna, you're up.
Good morning, committee. I'm Jenna Moyer, Advisor of Statutes Office. And this will be an overview of the committee's authorizing statute, which can be found at 39.7,160. Subsection A of this statute sets out the name of the committee and its duties, which include reviewing the number of individuals transferred from either state or private institutions and long-term care facilities to the home and community-based services, and the cost savings and outcomes associated, oversight of the savings from those transferred individuals, studying and determining effectiveness of the program, and cost analysis of institutions and those long-term care facilities, consideration of sufficient fund, if sufficient funding is provided for the wages and benefits of those direct care workers, and assessing progress to transfer individuals to HCBS services, reviewing and ensuring proceeds from successful transfers are applied to providing services for long-term care and HCBS, and monitoring and implementing and studying operations of HCBS, the Children's Health Insurance Program, PACE, which is the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, and the state Medicaid programs. I will note that in 2013, when the state privatized Medicaid MCOs, that the duties of this committee were expanded from just oversight of HCBS to also KanCare. So subsection B provides that the Joint Committee shall have 11 members, and it sets out who exactly appoints those. Essentially, 6 are from the House, 5 from the Senate. Subsection C specifies the terms of those appointments and how to fill vacancies. Subsection D sets out that the committee shall meet upon the call of the chair, and requires the committee to meet at least once in January and once in April during the regular legislative session, and at least once for 2 consecutive days during the 3rd and 4th calendar quarters, not to exceed 6 meetings in a year. In 2013, prior to 2013, this statute just read 4 meetings during the year. And then in 2013, when KanCare was expanded, or privatized, excuse me, that's when the change to language was made about once per the calendar quarter, once in January, once in April. And I think this might be sort of the impetus for this statutory overview, was the difficulty in scheduling a meeting in January this year. So this is just to let the committee know it hasn't always been like that, and that, that obviously could be changed. Subsection E of this statute requires the committee to submit a report at the beginning of each session to the legislature with information on HCBS and KanCare. And that report shall contain the number of individuals transferred from those institutions to HCBS, average daily census in state institutions and long-term care facilities, savings, and the current balance in the KDAD's HCBS fund. Then there are a lot of items that are to be contained in the KanCare report, including health outcomes, integration and coordination of healthcare procedures, availability of information to the public, community outreach efforts, comparison of costs of providing Medicaid prior to and after 2013, then comparison of estimated costs under an MCO system, and the costs expended under the program, caseloads, and written testimony that's provided to the Joint Committee on the impact of provision of Medicaid services under KanCare, which would be testimony we heard yesterday. Subsection F requires that the committee members have access to medical assistance reports and caseload data from KDHE. Subsection G is compensation for committee members. Subsection H allows the LCC to provide professional services requested by the committee. And subsection I allows the committee to make recommendations and introduce legislation as it deems necessary in performing its functions. And that subsection I was also another addition from the 2013 amendments. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, is there anyone has any questions about what we're supposed to do? Senator Petty.
Jenna, and maybe I just was kind of distracted and not listening completely, but when it came to the meeting days and yes, the issue that we had last year. So remind me again, is it that every quarter that we're supposed to meet, but not necessarily?
It doesn't say every quarter. It says at least once in January and once in April during the session, and then at least once for 2 consecutive days during each of the 3rd and 4th calendar quarters, not to exceed 6 meetings in a calendar year.
So we do have, so that's the part that I kind of blanked out on. So we
It could be changed to once a calendar quarter.
but right now
easier.
it says January.
Yeah, January and April, and then 2 quarters in the last year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Do you have any idea why that was required, a January and an April meeting?
I didn't look up the testimony from 2013, but I would presume that the intent was to make sure that you didn't just meet 2 consecutive days, squishing it in at the end of session and kind of, rolling it in to one. So I think the intent was to have 2 separate days during the session, not to just squish it in at the end.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does it cause any conflict with the scheduling requirements that we're not, our general session has been ending prior to April, at least this year and supposedly next year too?
So if the regular legislative session is not meeting in April, that would be, I guess you would be violating the statute if you met not during the session in April or during the session not in April. Yeah, it makes it a little
We might have to
more
tweak
tricky
that a little
depending on
bit.
the session scheduling, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I know. Part of it was we had made recommendations for proposed bills or whatever we were going to do earlier. And we did it sometimes in November and then in December. And I vaguely remember they said January might be a chance for us to then look at exactly what we're supposed to be doing, where things properly introduced from the year before in the process. And that's how January came up, that you want to do it early in the session to review, or if something wasn't working the way we wanted it to, or who would be introducing the bill or whatever, after we made our recommendations. Does that make sense? And that's why it came up that January was the first opportunity to review what we had done earlier.
Well, for me, I know, obviously, we all are swamped in January. It's very difficult to put a meeting together, and we've been working the last few years on Fridays. It's just difficult to meet on it in January, but we can work it out. So, committee, further questions? Jenna, thank you. Okay, next we will work on to discussion and or recommendations regarding KSA 39-6 for the 39-7-16 for the annual report. Oh. Janet, Senator Gossage has a question for you. Sorry about that, Senator. Here she comes.
I put the statute book away, so hopefully it's not too complicated.
Can you hear me? Okay?
All right, Senator Gossage.
Yes, just very briefly. Thank you, Jenna, for that update.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Mm-hmm.
All right. Forgive my voice today, everybody. My recollection in January, I agree with Representative Ballard. However, it was more of a reporting issue. So we had this meeting, let's say in October, there were things that the departments were going to do, and it was giving us an update on what all was done. So several months had gone by. It was kind of, the idea was to start our session with an update from the departments of what had happened over that time, updates from anybody who would be reporting to Bob Bethell. The problem we ran into last year for January was, as you recall, we made some changes on the Senate side as to Ways and Means. So many of our senators were either serving on those committees. So it ended up being a conflict of being able to have enough people from Bob Bethell. So definitely something we would want to look at for this year, to pick a date. And Senator Petty, I'm not sure if she's there. She had a conflict of two different committees today. She was one of them that we had difficulty getting her in as the minority leader of the Bob Bethell committee. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have it in January, but we should pick a date very early on. That's on the calendar. And I think it is important to have that beginning of the year report from the departments for all of us. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that, Senator. Committee further discussion? Seeing none. Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the annual report. Discussion? So just for clarification on my part, is this our recommendations, or is this something that we put together from what's happened this year? Elizabeth?
Representative Carpenter, sorry. So this was an agenda item from the April meeting because KLRD had presented a memo on the history of the Bethel Committee. And so you ran out of time in April. And so it was just a continuation from that topic of if you wanted to discuss and have recommendations specifically regarding the statute. So the agenda item just got bumped to this meeting.
Okay, I get it. I don't, because I've been on this committee a while and I never remembered an annual report. So I was like, wow, I'm kind of struggling here.
Well, we do an annual report based upon your recommendations.
Right, but
Yes.
not,
And at that meeting, there was reference to what's included in that annual report. So if you want to make any changes to that annual report as well, if that helps.
that's as clear as mud to me. Committee, any recommendations to the annual report? Senator Petty.
Well, I know we just touched on the topic of meetings, and so as Senator Gossage had mentioned just a moment ago, it's likely that there could be the same sorts of conflicts in January as there were the last year because of the change in how we're working on the budget. And so it probably would be important for us go ahead right now and set a date so that that could be on the calendar and then could be, as anything in the legislature can be, locked in to be looked at if thoughts are being made to have Friday meetings for Ways and Means. That's just one example.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea to, does anybody have a legislative calendar? Do you have that?
It's the first day.
This is the first day. Yeah, April's will be easy, but. Well, I think there's a little psychology there of trying to gear up for session, and at least from my point of view, it's, I wouldn't want to call anybody in before session for.
We just got the calendar yesterday, so it starts in January. Do you want me to email that to you?
No, this is
Okay.
fine.
It's the first day. It's the first day.
Oh, it's because the Monday is from Martin Luther King. Right.
So.
We're- Wait, Julie not here that first.
Mr. Chair, if I may make a comment. One of the difficulties in scheduling last year was getting members appointed. I remember for joint committees, it was almost 2 weeks into the session before Senate members were appointed to committees. So if you want a meeting early in the session, you might have to talk to your Senate president to make sure those appointments get made promptly.
And was that because for an election year too? Because,
Yeah, I imagine the election makes it a little
yeah.
more difficult.
So this year is probably finite. Yeah, we should be set, I would think, this year. So that may or may not be a factor unless some of you guys have made the president mad.
Maybe he knows something we don't know.
No, no, nothing. Well, maybe you want to tentatively schedule the 23rd?
January, Mr. Chairman, I think
Yeah,
that's a
January
good
23rd.
idea.
Wait a minute.
What was your date? No.
No.
No. All right. Is there a consensus here of the 23rd, Friday, the 23rd?
As much as we know.
Well, let's shoot for that, and then if we have to change it, we will, but at least we'll have a date on the calendar and to shoot for, so. Okay. Representative Sutton.
Mr. Chair, I'd probably also make a note that we should probably revisit the statute as far as the timing is concerned if we're not in general session in April. Because it says when, in April, when in general session, well, we won't be.
Right, right.
Well, conceivably, this time anyway. Maybe every other year we will be, but at least for now, we're not scheduled to be. In April, correct. And all we'd have to do is take out when we're in general session. I mean, it's not all that complicated, but
Does it say general session or session?
in regular session, it says.
Okay, so that would exclude the veto session then, I take it?
I would probably defer on that one.
Because technically, we're not out of session till, so Jenna's working on that.
The language is in regular session, so if that would be during the 90-day session. So if the veto session's not during those 90 days, likely wouldn't be regular session.
So is the veto session counted in our days or not?
Yes.
Okay. So it could be between up until veto session?
Yep, if it's in the 90 calendar days, then
Okay.
it should be.
I think
Okay.
that kind of takes care of it. It could be clear up to a veto session, so
Perfect, works for me.
it may be. Okay, any other discussion on that item? All right, well, we've got Senator Gossage.
I agree with Representative Sutton, Mr. Chair, in that I think we just need to take out the words that we're in session and just say that we meet in April. That we don't have to worry each year about, is it considered regular session, is it not? Just say that Bob Bethell will meet in April.
Very good, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Sutton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The word session is removed. Very good, thank you for that, Senator. Any other discussion on,
If I may make a clarification, is that a request to draft a bill? And then if so, would you prefer it to be in the House or the Senate? Or at least introduced, since you're a joint committee, you can choose either one.
yeah, I think it should be a drafted bill, and Ben's, it was Senator Gossage's message. I think it should start in the Senate. That would be my motion. second by Representative that
That works for me.
yeah, it was that we remove. What was your motion again?
Can you hear me?
Remove session. And the bill,
Yes.
yeah, and the bill starts in the Senate. So, very good. Committee further discussion. All right, seeing none, we're going to move on from that. Discussion recommendations from the quarter three meeting regarding budget. We have questions available here from, we have folks.
Did we vote on that? Did we have a final vote on the motion?
No, we didn't. Committee, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Second motion carries. So now we have removed session. We've started a bill that will start in the Senate. Okay, very good. Now we're going to move on to discussion recommendations. Committee discussion on this. We have folks here from KLRD, KDHE, and KDADS. Representative Bueller.
Just for clarification, we're looking for recommendations now, and they're available for questions. So if I have a recommendation that affects one of those agencies or a question, that's what we're doing? Right, okay. I want to go, if I may, I want to go back to some of yesterday's discussion, and when we were talking about complex wheelchairs. I know we have eliminated the duplicate prior authorization and prescriptions for repairs for complex wheelchairs. As I'm hearing from constituents, there feels like there's a conflicting guidance that's published by KDHE on implementing the removal of prior authorizations, and that was in KMAP General Bulletin 25204, effective 10/1, which states that prior authorization for the newly covered preventative maintenance is not required, but it goes on to say prior authorization for routine/non-routine repairs will continue to require prior authorizations per existing provisions. And then this one constituent provided a DME POS provider manual, page 49 of 128 states, effective July 1, 2025, prior authorization or PA is not required for the labor repair codes or the repair of any complex wheelchair. A copy of the prescription may not be required for durable medical equipment repairs, but must be submitted if requested by Kansas Medicaid. So the ask would be for KDHE to clarify the bulletin 25204 that prior authorization for repairs of any complex wheelchair is not required, or that KDHE clarify in policy that a prescription for the repair of a complex wheelchair is not required. There's confusion out there, so that would be out to KDHE, and I don't know if that question could be answered today or, okay.
Thank you. And Representative, if I could kind of piggyback on that, I think there was some discussion from the wheelchair folks and the MCOs yesterday, and I would add, with your permission, add that they all get together for a meeting. Now, I'm not talking about an annual meeting or requirement, but a one-time meeting that all of the players get together and come up with some recommendations that they can agree on for us to implement.
I'm fine with that. I just think when you hear testimony from the people that that live in those wheelchairs and what it takes to navigate the process, that is a good way to possibly help resolve it. And I've got, if I can piggyback off that a little bit, and it's related to this in that you'll sometimes hear that there's potential for fraud, waste, and abuse if the prior authorization is removed. And I don't understand that, but the ones that I've talked to, I think, and during our last session in the legislative budget, a provision was added that the OIG perform a utilization audit for repairs and preventing maintenance for no prior authorization. That would address any concerns if that was done, I would think. So, so I would just add that as well.
Very good. Thank you. Representative Reeves.
I want to support Representative Bueller's recommendation there. And so one of the conferees yesterday talked about establishing the Kansas Medicaid DME subcommittee. Is that what you were talking about?
No,
Representative
not,
Carpenter?
well, it would be, but it wouldn't be a continuing,
Okay. Wouldn't be a formal,
no, it would not be a formal deal or a requirement other than one time.
yeah, okay.
I don't think ongoing meetings are that good of a deal for a lot of people. Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I will also support that because I remember last session, we were talking about those wheelchairs, but the combination of some people were in their wheelchairs for 8, 9, 10 years, and they had totally outgrown those chairs, but yet they couldn't get a replacement for it. So, I don't know how, maybe that's something else they could really discuss. Because if you got that wheelchair maybe when you were 12 and now you're 20, just physically, it may not work for you anymore, as well as, not that the chair is old, but it's not compatible with everything else you're supposed to do, especially if you may require, a breathing apparatus or something else. So, could that be included in it? Because that was a big issue that we discussed last year, that they couldn't get anyone to do anything about it, and yet it wasn't functional anymore for them.
I'd like to think that was included in Representative Bueller's and the discussion that they'll have with the MCOs and stuff. Senator Petty.
I certainly agree with everything that's been discussed, and I think, Representative Carpenter, that we're talking about your suggestion of having a one-time DME group meeting to come up with solutions. I wanted to make sure, because I heard this yesterday, and I think it might be outside of the scope of what had been included before, of mentioning that whether the leg devices and the power seating elevations were included in regular maintenance as well. So I just wanted to mention those items. And I think that if there is a DME group that meets, that could bring forth those recommendations with that.
Representative Reeves.
Yeah, I think, if this one-time group meets, it's also looking at some recommendations for future. Because if you think about children who are 5, 6, 7 years old, and you think about the technology that they've already been exposed to and operate in some of their assistive devices, technology is just going to improve more and more and more as these kids grow up. So there's something we're going to need to keep looking always at the future, because the cost is going to continue to rise. And so I think, if we have this ongoing discussion about assistive devices, and we always have to know that these things are going to continue to progress because they're computers.
Sure. And I think maybe for, just the committee's perspective, maybe we should stop right there with your recommendation and then have recommendations for the committee when they meet. And I would suggest that these folks meet before our meeting in January and come back with us. So what we would do is we would start a list of things for them to address in that meeting separately. You see what I'm saying? We're calling the meeting, and now we're discussing items to address during that meeting for them to come back to us with answers. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm all in favor of getting everyone in the room to discuss this and try to smooth out this process as best as possible. I am going to be rather reticent if we decide to take off all guardrails, however, on this process. I've seen way too many fraud settlements in the news for me to just say, sure, blank check, Medicaid's going to pay for it. So I'm going to be real reluctant on that. But I think getting everyone in the room to try to smooth out the process is a great move and an excellent first step.
Yeah, I don't think anybody on this committee is looking at, blank checks and removing everything. But there does have to be some common sense, as you well know, about these wheelchair and prior auths. And I think we've addressed some of them, but no, I'm certainly not. And I'm thankful that we have our Inspector General here to keep an eye on things if there would happen to be some fraud and abuse and stuff like that up too. So, but with the committee's permission, now we'll start on recommendations for answers from when they meet. So, Representative Bueller.
So I'm just making sure that I'm tracking the process that we're going to use. So, for example, this came up in Social Services Budget Committee last year, and I think to some degree it's still an issue, that it's coverage for preventive maintenance annually to identify repair parts, needed parts, et cetera. So KDHE has implemented a preventive maintenance coverage plan. I won't get into that per se, but here's where I think clarification is needing if I'm following what you're asking. So it would be imperative that any repair parts or replacement parts identified during the comprehensive preventive maintenance or safety check at that appointment can be performed and billed separately. The goal of the PM is to ensure the wheelchair is functioning properly and anticipated repairs due to normal wear and tear are identified before more damage is done. I think that's what Representative Ruiz and Representative Ballard were talking about. And that when that's not done, the patient is without their mobility. So is the process then to say, okay, we need you to come back and give us an analysis on the preventive maintenance checks in that process? Is that what we're looking for?
That's the way I envision this is, and the pluses and minuses, so to speak.
Okay.
Pros and cons.
Okay.
Of why we don't do that now, or is there a good reason?
Okay, so another one would be just the whole billing process.
Right.
I think that's part, okay, got it.
So it would be, okay, we want this, why don't we do that? And we just need an answer one way or the other as a committee that we can say, oh, here's the reason, because I don't know that much about, and I don't think everybody's real knowledgeable. So there may be some perfect reasons why they do that. We just don't know. So that's what I envision, all of our questions, recommendations that we ask would have pros and cons.
Okay. Well, those would be mine, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Did you get that, Elizabeth?
I think so.
Very good. Committee, further recommendations. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the long-term care ombudsman brought up an excellent point with regard to the prescriptions at nursing homes. I would endorse the language that they included in their testimony dealing with disincentives, financial disincentives for choosing a different pharmacy and charging repackaging fees.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Gossage is texting me questions too, so I'm distracted. I apologize for that. Yeah, I agree 100%.
By the Senate, I'm used to it. It's okay.
Okay, I agree with that 100%. Actually, I think we had that on our recommendations from one of our interim committees, and I can't remember which one. Nursing home interim committee was addressing the fees.
Very good.
And then packaging fees. So I think that's very
Perfect. Then I endorse the work of the nursing home committee,
well.
at least on that one. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, everybody clear on that motion? Representative Ruiz. Okay. Representative Sutton, you want to repeat your ask?
I'm sorry?
You want to repeat your ask?
Sure, I can even give the phrasing here. I would recommend that we adopt the language asked by the, requested by the long-term care ombudsman, to wit. Yeah, I used it. I used that. The right to a pharmacist of the resident's choice, irrespective of the type of medication distribution system used by the facility, and to not be charged a fee or receive a financial incentive or disincentive for choosing a pharmacy other than the facility's preferred pharmacy. The resident may not be charged for repackaging if that cost can be included on the facility cost report.
Very good. That's exactly what I thought you said. Very good. Committee further discussion. Representative Ballard.
This is not the same as the dispensing fee.
Yeah.
It is the same. Well, what we talked about yesterday was it may not go
Oh,
directly.
that $10 one.
Oh, that it goes directly to the pharmacy, and yet they say, no, they don't get it directly. So I want to make sure we address that.
That's speculation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a different one. Okay, committee further. Oh, why don't we just vote on all these recommendations together? Would that work, or do you want to vote on them individually?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think, provided that there may be dissension on some of the recommendations, we probably ought to vote on each one separately.
I think you're right. Okay, very good. So all in favor of the recommendation? Elizabeth, could you repeat the recommendation? The first one and then the second one. So the first one is wheelchairs, and the second one is dispensing fees.
So for the first one, I have that a complex wheelchair / DME work group be formed and report back to the committee in January 2026 to provide at minimum an analysis of the preventative maintenance / safety check process and an analysis of the billing process.
And would that require the meeting? Okay, very good. Committee, is everybody clear with that? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, the dispensing fees.
And I was that in yesterday's testimony? It was. Okay, so if you'll give me just a second to pull up her testimony. Okay. The right to a pharmacist of a resident's choice, irrespective of the type of medication distribution system used by the facility, and to not be charged a fee or receive a financial incentive or disincentive for choosing a pharmacy other than the facility's preferred pharmacy. The resident may not be charged for repackaging if that cost can be included on facility cost report.
Very good. Committee, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we are back on recommendations, and I do have one here from Senator Gossage, and I think it's a great one myself. If I can remember my password here. Add Bob Bethell, Chair and Vice Chair, to the committee determining the contents of the application for the Rural Health Transportation Funds before the final request is sent to the governor. Discussion? I have a second from Representative Sutton. Discussion? Senator Petty.
So if, as we move forward, that discussion, I would say if we're going to move forward, that it should include the ranking minority.
I'm not sure what that means, what the recommendation is. Can you elaborate on that? Okay.
Has her hand up.
Senator Gossage, are you there?
I am. I'm sorry. Sometimes there is no sound that's coming from the committee room over WebEx. So I'm not sure. We kind of lose something in translation. Yes, since Bob Bethell was designed to be the oversight committee for anything having to do with KanCare, especially when we're talking about a $50 billion project, I think it's imperative that we have representation on the committee that will be determining what we are applying for with the federal government. And there's nobody from the Oversight Committee on that. And I would be happy to amend my recommendation to include the minority ranking member, as was suggested by Senator Petty.
And that, would that include the House ranking also?
I don't think so. I think the committee itself, whoever, if you've got the Senate as chairing, then the Senate would be the Senate ranking minority member. Otherwise, it ends up being 2 and 2, and that was never the intention.
That's fine. I just wanted a clarification.
Yes.
Committee questions on the recommendation. Senator Petty.
The only thing that I would question about this is that the Kansas Rural Health Innovation Alliance application is really not part of KanCare. And so it's, it's not dealing specifically with the MCOs and with their services. If it's looking at, and this application, as we know, is on a fast track, so I think that the senator's recommendation is deals with if we do receive the if we do receive the funding, because there's two parts. One would be if we're approved applicant, then we would be part of the split of the 25 billion. And then if we have any program that then is specified, we would receive money under the 25 billion, the second 25 billion. So I do see this as being an expansion of what really the Bob Bethel's oversight is, and not part of it. If it's being asked to look at it after when the funds come in, I would think that maybe we could be non-voting members of this committee, not voting members of how this money is dispersed, because it's not part of Bob Bethel.
If I may, I would disagree in that there should be oversight in what are we asking these monies for? How would these monies be spent? If that application has already been submitted and we've never seen it, I just think we need to have some representatives of the people as part of this committee.
Very good. Well, I do think there should be some legislative involvement in this process. I'm not sure Bethel is the right one, but either the public health chair in the Senate and vice chair, or some legislators need to be involved in this process. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree that Bethel may not be the perfect fit on this due to the fact that, as the senator mentioned, this does go beyond Medicaid. However, with that being said, appropriations is the jurisdiction of the legislature. And so there absolutely has to be legislative input into this process. I'm not averse to making the Bethel Committee that voice for the people of Kansas, due to the fact that we have a little bit of a time crunch here. I'm not sure what the thought process was that this thing gets hammered out November 5th and money's assigned by December 31st, but we're not in session during that time. And so in order to play with the pitch that's thrown at us, I'm going to be, in support of Bethel, or I would also accept some substitution, but we would need legislative input into this process, absolutely.
Very good. Representative Ballard, did you have a question?
I'm torn between this because I believe whenever we can have oversight, we should. And I remember when they came up with the 3 for-profit organizations, that first year, we did not have any oversight over what those 3 were doing at all. And that's how Bob Bethel got started, so that we would have some say-so about how all of this was running. So in this case, I'm not sure Bethel should be the one on it, but we should have some kind of oversight over it, just so that we have input. The big problem I have sometimes that things come back and we had no input at all on how it was done, and then we have to solve the problem. But it is a stretch in many ways, but I'm in favor of oversight, that we have some input about what happens. But if you'll add that other part, if not Bethel, some other organization or some other department should have some say-so in it.
Senator Erickson, I knew I was going to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I understand the question whether this is the appropriate legislative representation. However, I would ask, what federal government agency is in charge of the applications and deciding this $50 billion grant? It's CMS. What other legislative committee has more knowledge or working of CMS than Bob Bethel? So for that reason, because CMS is the one deciding, I see the connection there and think that this is probably the appropriate body. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just to piggyback on that, KDHE is also in charge of the grant, which we oversee. So Representative Reeves and Senator Gossage, I'll get to you in a minute, okay?
I agree. I totally agree that there needs to be some oversight. I guess my hesitation is because I don't know enough about the grant itself. I know it's a $50 billion, but we're not going to get $50 billion. We don't even know how much Kansas is going to get. It is going to be $50 billion? $500,000, okay. All right. So, I don't know who the other players are. I don't know who else gets to decide where the funds are going to go to, how it's going to be used. I don't know any of those other details in order to be able to say that we need to be a part of this. But I agree there needs to be some kind of an oversight, legislative oversight. I'm just not real clear as to what.
Well, the list came out last week of the folks that were involved in it. I don't know.
Yeah, I've not seen
Anybody
it.
have that list? You have it? Okay, here's the list of people that are involved in the grant process.
So there were 14 appointments to the Kansas Rural Health Initiative Alliance. They are Kansas Hospital
That's wrong.
Community Care Network of Kansas, the chapter American Academy of Pediatrics, the Kansas Health Institute, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, UNAIDS Kansas,
Everybody but us.
Association, and Kansas Grant Makers.
Thank you for that. Senator Gossage.
Yes, I'm sorry. I could hear nothing that Elizabeth was saying, so I don't know who those members are. But I can tell you that I agree with Representative Ballard. Too much of the time when we were supposed to have oversight as legislators, we do not. And I think this is a very important new funding that would be coming from the federal government, and this application would determine how we intend to spend that funding should it be received in the state of Kansas. And I agree with what was said by Senator Erickson in that this is the Bob Bethell Committee does oversee KDHE, and the spending would be through CMS. And so by virtue of that, the chair and vice chair are both representatives of and chairing the health committees in both houses. So the Public Health Committee in both houses happens to be the chair and vice chair, Bob Bethell, by design. Therefore, I would again put forth my recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you for that. Senator Petty.
I just need some clarification as to whether this recommendation is talking about being part of that extensive committee that we just heard about from Elizabeth, and having, I guess, input before the application is submitted on November the 5th, or if we're talking about if we are an approved applicant and do then receive or a part of the split for the 25 billion and potentially the second 25 billion on programs, is that the point then we're asking to have legislative involvement?
Senator Gossage.
Both before and after.
I'm really hesitant about the before. It is, let me think, it is October the 14th. And I'm sure that these dates are already set or potentially set for these meetings. So that would mean if we, of course, we haven't even approved this or not, but that we would have to be, whoever would have to be available to meet with this, to be part of this by November the 5th. Because as we heard yesterday, this is a fast track. There's no slowing down here on when this is going to happen. So at the November 5th end, as Representative Sutton reminded us, the approval is going to be coming out December the 31st. So I'm just saying, we're trying to insert ourselves into something that's, the ball is rolling fast.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I fully understand that. All the more reason that I think that we need to be a part of it. And as part of the oversight is during the process, not after the fact, and here's what we did. So I just would welcome a vote from this committee to request that we be included in any of the decisions, any of the committee's meetings going forward, so that we know precisely what is being requested for these funds from the federal government, the purpose of the funds.
Yeah, and I agree with you. This day of WebEx and all that, we can participate, in the meeting from WebEx or whatever. I'm not sure how the meetings go about, but I do think that we should be able to report back to this committee about how the process went, recommendations, or all that. I think it's incumbent on us to be involved in this process. Senator Ruiz.
You just answered my question, Representative Chair. You just answered my question. That's good. I'm good.
Okay, and so Can KDHE clarify, are you in charge of the meetings? Are you planning meetings? Secretary Stanek? Yeah, please. This is kind of informal, so
Thanks, hi, everyone. Secretary Stanek. So how it works is you have to designate your process through the application process about how you're going about this. So the governor is actually in charge of deciding who's on the committee. So your request should go to her related to your involvement. This is not personal, it's just a matter of the process. The first process, as you described, is correct, Senator Petty. Getting the application ready through stakeholder input, et cetera. I noted yesterday and in your packet of information from KDHE, we did an MOU with the Healthcare Collaborative from KU, Dr. Bob Mosier and his group, to help us get this application ready, which we are in alignment between KDADS, KDHE, and Dr. Mosier's group. There is a deadline by the federal government, CMS, for the November 5th. It has to be submitted, so there's no stopping. There has been one virtual meeting with the group that was read off back there of all the list of those RHIA members. There's another one scheduled this week. I don't remember the date, but I can find out. And then from there, once the application gets put in, and say we get funds, which we hope Kansas gets the funds, then another process has to be outlined in the application about what the body will be to oversee and distribute those funds, and then you're held accountable by your metrics, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, it's under review of the governor about what that structure will be. It is not necessarily the same list of those members that were read off a bit ago. They will play a role, but there could be a different process for the oversight of the funds, and I do not know the answer to that because it's in the governor's hands right now. Does that help? Okay.
yes, thank you for that. Committee questions of Secretary while she's up there? Senator Petty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Secretary, so the governor set up the group.
It has to be done by the governor per the application process. Mhm.
And so that's how how this, for the Rural Health Transformation Program.
It's correct.
was set up. And so what you are saying is that if we move forward with this recommendation, then our request would go to the governor.
That's correct.
The governor has said that.
We could pass it through, but it's got to be determined by the governor.
Right, and so we would actually, I wanted to clarify, we would actually then be making, it sounds like, two requests. One would be to be part of this initial
Get involved
formation
now.
group.
Mhm.
And then the second would be to be part of the, once we've received the funding, the group for talking about the distribution.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator Gossage, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I would just say that I'm disappointed that we don't have whenever we're talking about a stakeholder meeting, I can't imagine a more important stakeholder than a representative from our legislature. So I know this has been going on for a month now, and I still would hold to that we as members of the legislature, representatives should be included in any of those discussions before the application is submitted, and of course, after the application is submitted. That is my recommendation.
Very good, thank you. Committee, is there a second? Second by Senator Murphy. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Senator Petty. Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Hold that for a minute. Senator Petty has a question.
So I would just like to have staff or whoever to read back what we're actually voting on. Okay.
Elizabeth?
Okay, this is what I've captured. I have a couple of questions. So the recommendation, do you want it to say the recommendation to request the governor, or just the recommendation is to include the chair, vice chair, and ranking minority member of the Bethel Committee and the Kansas Rural Health Innovation Alliance before stakeholder recommendations are sent to the governor, and also after the grant is
I think our,
given to Kansas.
I think our letter should be to the governor asking for those folks to be on or part of the committee,
For both parts.
for both parts.
And then there was a question about clarifying voting or non-voting. I'm not,
I'm not. Representative Ballard.
Okay, now this is getting real complicated. I'm in favor of the fact that we should be included in the oversight. But I'm gonna be real honest now. So is this a move on the governor at this point? Or we're saying she didn't include us, now we're gonna ask to be included and push the issue? Or do we really just want oversight?
If I could respond, may I?
Senator Gossage.
We just want oversight, Representative Ballard. I'm saying we should have been part of it in the beginning, but we were not. But we definitely need to be part of the oversight of this. And right now, this is in the hands of KDHE. Then the application will go to the governor. So I guess I'm not understanding why KDHE cannot include us as part of the stakeholder group before it goes to the governor, and then there'll be a different stakeholder group after that. So to me, it appears that we're asking that we be included in any discussions going forward before it's given to the governor. And then when the governor creates a new stakeholder group or whomever does after the application comes back and we find out about any funding, then there'll be, as you said, Secretary, maybe a new stakeholder group, maybe a revised stakeholder group, but in any case, we should have legislators included in that. And it makes sense that would be of the chair and vice chair of the health committees.
Very good. Thank you for that. Senator Petty.
Well, I think we just heard from the secretary that the governor is the lead agent. And so that's who set up the committee. So if we're going to have a motion here, it would be that it has to go to the governor. It's not the secretary that's appointing that. So it would go to the governor to request that the legislature let those legislative members be a part of this, be a part of the application committee, and then also be a part of when and if funding is received for the distribution.
That's correct. Just to clarify what Senator Gossage was indicating, the governor is on point and passed down. She had to name a lead agency to submit the application. That is KDHE. However, she appoints who's on both of those committees, both of those bodies, the one that was read off, and then whatever future body structure is created to oversee any funds that we get and how they'll be distributed. So you are correct. From my perspective, it would go to the governor.
Representative Reeves.
I trying to get around this because my hesitation again to support this is it wasn't a part of our agenda, as far as I know. And I've been here. It hasn't been a part of our agenda. Wasn't a part of the agenda for these past 2 days. And now we're I feel a little blindsided by this. And now we're having a discussion, but I think we needed to have a deeper discussion. I wish it was really a part of the agenda. And so that's part of my hesitation here because, we didn't have conferees to talk about this. And so that we can make, or at least that I can feel I can make, an informed decision.
Thank you for that. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to understand, this would be a recommendation to request the governor have the chair, vice chair, and ranking minority as part of this process, correct? Is the legislature are we not stakeholders in this process? And the governor can say no, correct? It's a request to let the legislature, which, in my opinion, is a very key stakeholder in this process, but the governor can say no for whatever reasons the governor may have. This is simply a request to say, hey, we're stakeholders too, and we would like to be considered part of this process. I don't see what the harm in that is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Petty.
And I think if we, and that's why I asked that question again, I think if we clarify that we're making that request as has been presented to us, to the governor, for both of these two parts, then I do agree with Senator Erickson that that's the process we should go through if we're going to move forward with this. And we have bannered around here some different, so I appreciate the chair clarifying that we're talking about the chair, the vice chair, and the ranking minority as the positions that we're talking about. So I think I understand now what we're actually going to be voting on, but before we vote again, I would like for staff to read what we're voting on.
And may I say something, Mr. Chair?
Senator
This
Gossage.
is- Thank you so much. Thank you, Secretary Stanek, for the clarification. If I may address what was mentioned by Representative Ruiz, in our agenda, you may recall yesterday, excuse me, you may recall yesterday that we had a presentation regarding this transformation fund, where they were in the process. And so it would be during this part of the recommendation that this would be brought up. That they made a presentation yesterday about where they were in the funding and what it looked like at this point and the process that they were going through. So it would be during the recommendation process that we would that the request would be made that we have, as part of the stakeholder group, representatives from Bob Bethell and or the health committees for both houses. And yes, I agree with, if that is the case, as the secretary is telling us, that the request needs to go to the governor, that I abide by that.
Very good. Committee further discussion. Yeah, go ahead and read the final.
I actually have a question, so.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So recommendation to request the governor, and my question is, who do you want to, who's going to make that request? So what I have is recommendation to request the governor to include the chair, vice chair, and ranking minority member of the Bethel Committee in the Kansas Rural Health Innovation Alliance before stakeholder recommendations are sent to the governor for the application process and any future committees created for funding distribution.
And that letter, the way I envision it, would come from the Bethel Committee. It would be from the Bethel Committee to the governor to request the committee members that we're talking about be part of that.
So you would have KLRD draft that for you and have Senator Gossage sign it?
Yep, we would. And just my own personal deal, when I saw that list, I thought, well, there's no legislators involved. And I was kind of taken back by that, because it does affect us, and it is going to be a part of Bethel and KanCare and all the healthcare stuff. So anyway, committee, is everybody clear on this? Okay. Did I already make a motion?
Now you can.
Okay.
You did, but I asked a question.
Okay, so my motion includes what Elizabeth said there, and I have a second by Representative Sutton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, very good. I wondered what we were going to do this morning to take up all this time, and now I know. So back on recommendations. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we didn't hear this reported, but I think certain level of kudos ought to go out to KDADS for taking some some pretty bold steps and pretty big steps toward getting off of the corrective action plan placed by the federal government with regard to error rates. They've implemented a new process, and it looks like it might actually go live in January, and maybe we'll be making steps toward getting off those caps.
To clarify, what agency was it? Were we,
That was KDADS.
and we're talking about SNAP?
Well, with the Medicaid caps that they were on. I think it spilled over into SNAP as well, actually, but that's a separate issue. It can conceivably go over into SNAP, but that's not being implemented right now. It's regarding the corrective action plans on Medicaid. The error rates.
I'm not aware that, was KDADS involved in that, or was it DCF as SNAP? We talked about error rates, but that was PERM, which is KDHE. Can someone refresh my memory about, the error rate for SNAP is a 10%.
Did I get two of them crossed up just then?
You
I
may
think I may have.
DCF is SNAP.
I've got too much in my head. I should probably write this down.
So DCF is SNAP, and KDADS.
It was DCF, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Andy was here. I should have said it when he was here, and he could help me out on this. But yeah, Andy and his gang have done some good work.
Very good, thank you for that. Elizabeth, do you have that recommendation that you could read to us?
Sort of, I'll
I think that was just a thank
Okay,
you.
yeah. So I have a motion, and do I have a second of that recommendation? Second by Representative Bueller.
What are we dealing with? Do we clarify what we're actually talking about?
It's attaboy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Representative Sutton.
And as my memory is coming a little bit more clear, it's regarding the in-home care, making sure that everyone is credentialed.
Okay.
There you go.
Representative Ballard.
I'm not sure exactly where this comes, but it was from our first testimony with Becky Fast, where she talked about the human element situation with the AI use in the chat box, and where she talked about a lot of, I won't just say young people, a lot of people go to that chat box, but they're not getting the right or maybe helpful information. I'm not sure exactly what we can do about that, but maybe what I was thinking last night is at least have a comment about it so that we actually don't put, especially young people that are very vulnerable in this position because of the information they get from AI. And what she talked about was the human element was sort of missing. And I even called a friend to say, what can we do about this? And she said, the only thing we really could do is at least make a statement about this is out there and how do we protect. I don't know how the state does it, but I just felt I had to say something about it because she gave that instance that they were telling them, do this and tell them how to commit suicide and how to do this and exclude it. But I don't know what we can do about it, except make some statements that this is out there and we are aware of it. And I don't know if this is what KDHE does, or would DCF be responsible for just statements that are out there? But if we just let it go when we know it's out there, we're not monitoring it. And we should, in some way, be monitoring it.
And I had that marked as something to bring up as well. I know when Becky in her testimony, and Becky is a social worker, she had mentioned that, and I even wrote down the list of states that have already passed legislation about the use of AI technology in health treatment. So I'm not sure what we want or if we want to have something, and I would agree, I think it maybe is important to say something about not, that we do not condone the use of AI technology in any kind of health treatment, or something to that effect. But I don't know how to go any further with it, but I had it marked as well.
Committee, further, Representative Reeves.
I'm not sure we're ready to look at legislation yet, and we do have some examples of states to look at legislation. I would love to see an informational hearing in the Health and Human Services Committee and the equivalent Public Health in the Senate. Maybe we can even do a joint one, where we can have people come and present to us the pros and cons, I guess, because there are a lot of pros and cons to this. And I think we could become much more informed about that. And if a legislative action is the result of that, so be it. But I know, for one, I'm not informed enough yet as to be able to propose any kind of legislation.
And I agree 100%. That was what I was going to say, was that we do some kind of a recommendation that we get informed by the mental health experts and folks about how we can prevent this. But I don't think we're the experts in the field.
I am fine with that. Like I said, I didn't know what to do, but to just let it go when you know it's out there, it just didn't seem that I just felt we had to address it either by a statement, or I like the fact I don't want to wait to an interim study, because that's a year from now. But like, if we could just do it, maybe social services might be able to do it, or someone else might be able to do it, to make people more aware that this is out there.
Okay, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we were all kind of shocked by the story that was told around that. I guess my question is, Mr. Chair, at the end of the day, what can we do as legislators other than what we do with any kind of online or social media, is tell parents, you need to be monitoring what your child is doing, what they are, subject to online. I would love it if there was some appropriate role that we had in trying to fix that, and maybe it's just providing opportunity to hear this in, like we did yesterday in committee. But at the end of the day, I don't know how we pass a bill that says, hey, we can stop this or prevent it. I think it's incumbent upon the parents. I think it's incumbent upon those who have relationships with the children to make sure that's not happening. As much as I hate hearing what happened, I don't know realistically that there's a government solution for that type of a problem other than awareness of the people who are in that child's life. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wrestled with this one too. When you're talking about online, I mean, this could be anywhere in the world. And so legislating from a state seems ineffective at the very best. Now, one thing, though, that did stick in my mind is that if the state is utilizing AI for, or recommending AI services for counseling, that we make sure that we're only using AI services that are supervised by a human, that's not going to come out making bizarre recommendations like the ones that we heard in the story. But other than that, I'm all for an informational hearing. I worry about what enforcement would look like from a state level on a global issue. But if we're recommending a counseling service of some sort that utilizes AI, I would want to make sure that we're only utilizing services that are overseen by a human who maybe has some idea of what they're doing.
Well, I think it really is about prevention, at this point in time. What would prevent that from happening? And that's more how we should look at it, is making sure that it doesn't happen again. And I think this AI thing, we're going to run into plenty of other issues along the same lines of healthcare and what happens if they misdiagnose, Representative Ruiz.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a recommendation regarding this topic, and that we have an informational hearing to be held in Health and Human Services Committee this coming session. Would rather have a joint one, where we can have the Senate and the House together to have an informational hearing. This would also help us to make an announcement at the well and invite other legislators to come and sit in and listen in to this, because it's a huge topic.
Sure. I have a recommendation and a second. Elizabeth, do you want to?
Recommend that an informational hearing on the availability and/or current use of AI health technology be held during the session in Health and Human Services Committee.
Is she good or what? Okay, committee, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. More recommendations. Representative Bueller.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt, sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier. As to the first recommendation about recommending to the governor, asking the members to be placed on that committee, I was given a reminder about Policy 33, which prohibits interim and joint committees from making recommendations to agencies or other branches of government without approval from the LCC. So based upon that recommendation, the committee will have to reach out to the LCC to get approval to reach out to the governor.
Yeah, I think we ran into that last year. And our letter went in the trash. So would the committee be okay with amending that to include the LCC in the process? Okay. Are we clear now? We amended the recommendation to ask the LCC.
Perfect.
Okay. Very good. We're flying by the seat of our pants here, I'll tell you that. Representative Bueller, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to bring up a topic that I think Haley Ordoin brought up in her ombudsman yesterday, and this actually ties back to one of the interim committees we had on nursing homes, and it's about the surveyor staff. And we've heard now for 2 years, or however long it's been, that we're chronically short. We don't have the nurses to staff it. The statute is KSA 39-947 alpha. That's what establishes the surveying process within KDADS. We made a recommendation in the, when we were talking about nursing homes, that we establish an independent survey process that does not go through KDADS. There are other states essentially that outsource the surveying process. I would like to consider whether it's amending that statute from this committee. Certainly welcome discussion. I don't think we're ever going to solve the problem. When you look at their chart, when you look at KDAD's chart of all the vacancies they have in their surveying positions across the state, it doesn't happen. There's a second element to it in that the nursing homes feel like the process is rigged against them, so they don't use the informal dispute resolution process or even the independent informal dispute resolution process. Other states have contracted out. It might be more expensive to the state, but I bet it solves the problem, and I bet it gets nursing facilities more comfortable with using the IDR process And this is all when you have immediate jeopardy citations and those kind of things. We could spend the entire day talking about it, but that is, I'd like to keep it at least narrowly focused on that statute and maybe amending that statute. So,
So this is just for the IDR?
yes.
Okay, that's what, and did you have a specific number of committee members to be on
It
that?
would amend the statute that would say KDADS would contract out for the IDR process.
Okay,
And I'm open, if I'm not doing that right.
well, I know it was a 3-member
Oh, yeah.
committee, and
I see where you're going.
you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
So do we want to add, do we want to add 5, and they would be 2 from the nursing home industry, 2 from you see what I'm saying?
I do.
We need a,
Yeah, I'm open to suggestion there. I just think the current process we have is broken, and it'll never get fixed. And we need to do something different.
yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I just think that we ought to go farther and list 5 members or something, and 2 from the, the nursing home industry, 2 from KDADS, and 2 from
Open to suggestion, and
somebody else. Yeah, and
that's where I'm going.
yeah. Right. Very good. Elizabeth?
The recommendation that that the statute KSA 39-947A be amended to create an independent surveying process and the creation of a committee of 7 members. So,
Very good. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I move what Elizabeth just said.
Perfect. Second by Representative Ballard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Committee, further discussion, recommendations. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as going back to the previous, in lieu of the Rule 33, is it 33, 30?
LCC policy 33.
LCC policy 33. Knowing that the LCC just met yesterday, I was concerned about the timing with the tight deadline we have. So staff is going to check and see about what LCC might be able to do, because they only meet usually once a month, and that would really back us up on the timeline. So just for the committee's information, I think we need to be cognizant of that and see if there's some way to expedite that rule from LCC. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think that's a good idea. We are under time. I think it's very important after we get the money, the legislature is involved in it. I don't know how we'll be involved in it originally, but after that, I think it's really important. So you want a clarification on when LCC meets next?
I don't think that's, I just wanted to make the committee aware that since they just met yesterday and they only meet once a month, that might affect the timeline, but we're checking on, staff is checking on options for, if there are options for expediting that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you for that. Committee, further recommendations? Representative Reeves.
I recommend that the 2026 legislature permanently remove the year-specific language for the CHIP eligibility threshold. Every year, we've been doing a proviso to fund CHIP, and it would be great if we didn't have to do that every year. And the way you do that is you permanently remove that year-specific language for CHIP.
Second by Representative. Discussion, committee discussion. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have missed some of the meetings. What year is specified?
So 2008.
Yeah.
In 2008, it was locked in at 225% of the federal poverty level, or 250%. And so every year, we have to put a proviso in the budget to raise the federal poverty level up. Because it's in statute that it would be figured, the CHIPS eligibility rate would be figured at a 2008 rate. And so now it's, given inflation from 2008, it's gone up and up and up and up. Last year I had a bill. There were 4 bills together, but there was a lot of discussion about that bill, problems with it, of doing that. And so in conference, it was removed, but it's still in the Senate. It passed the House. The bill passed the House. So it's still there. And at some point in time, it needs to be addressed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question would be, why did they put a date specific in the original legislation? What was the purpose? And 2, what would be the fiscal note on removing it and having it roll? What would be the fiscal note on that?
There is a fiscal note. I'm not sure how much it is, because it just goes up incrementally, like as the federal poverty level goes up, it goes up. So there is a small fiscal note. I used to know that number. I have no idea why I think it was a mistake that they included in 2008, that they actually put that date in there. It should have just said, the federal poverty level throughout and adjusted automatically. But there is a small fiscal note. Heather, do you know what the fiscal note is on that?
Mr. Chair, I just looked up the bill from last year, unless Heather has it.
Okay, Jenna?
Let's see, is this on? Am I on? Okay. What I remember is 2022, when we first started working on this, there was a fiscal note associated with that first bill. Our understanding is since that time, there is no longer a fiscal note because we are holding the CHIP eligibility level at 250% a year at a time. So we're not adding more kids on. In 2022, we did because we adjusted it that year, but now it's continuing to be the same eligibility rate year over year since the legislature started temporarily fixing that. Does that answer your question, Senator Erickson? That's my understanding of this. Follow up with research and the budget department to be sure, but that has been my understanding all along working on this. I can, grab my phone and quickly look at the fiscal note. If it helps, Jenna, it was House Bill 2386 on the House side.
Sorry, I looked up the Senate bill and it was Senate sub and there wasn't an updated fiscal note, so.
If I can, while Jenna's looking that up, I can answer the 2008 question. When we first started looking at this, we pulled the testimony from 2008 when that legislation passed. And the original bill that passed the Senate had no mention of 2008. There was no mention. In conference committee, that is where it got added. We never have been able to find out the answer why, and the assumption was always it was a mistake. 2008 should not have been put in there. The original intent on the Senate side was no year specific for the federal poverty level, and then it was suddenly there in conference committee. No other state has year-specific language around their CHIP program or other programs. This is very unique to Kansas.
And Elizabeth has told me that there is no fiscal note on it. So it's basically Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say the same thing. I recall every year fixing this in appropriations to change the date so that any fiscal note would have already been worked in because we change it every year. So we're not going to see an increase in budgetary spending. I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly. However, you said that in 2022, we stopped adjusting it? I don't recall that. I thought we adjusted it every year.
So what I mean by that, in 2022, that's when the first budget proviso got passed because no one was aware of this issue until the fall of 21. So between 2008 and 2021, KDHE was adjusting that federal poverty level for CHIP back to the 2008 level. Once we started passing that temporary budget proviso, beginning with the 2022 budget, that is when KDHE started readjusting the FPL. No, they didn't, sorry, they no longer had to readjust it. It was 250% of the current year's federal poverty level.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't understand you correctly, so I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, so there wouldn't be a fiscal note on this. We just wouldn't have to do a proviso every year, and, you know, that's one proviso less.
That's why we had the bill last year. Senator Gossage.
Yes, thank you so much. That did come over to us rather late, if you recall, Mr. Chair. And so this year will give us an opportunity to take a deeper dive into this and see what other states are doing. So if the Representative Ruiz would be agreeable to amend the recommendation that we review this bill this year, not just automatically remove that, but that we review that. And there's a very good chance we could pass that on the Senate side. We just need more time. We didn't have any time last year.
Yes, she's okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So we have a motion. Who seconded that?
I did.
Okay. So everybody clear on the motion we're voting for? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. More recommendations, committee. Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would encourage some assistance on this one. I'm going to go back to yesterday when we were talking about sedation dentistry or mobile anesthesia and needing a standard. Are we together? Okay. And I don't know if it's as simple as encouraging KDHE/KDADS to work with CMS to request a billing code. I don't know the process, but we need to fix this. In the end, if these people are winding up either in a hospital stay or somewhere else, it's costing the state more for Medicaid expenses than it would be to have mobile or another form of sedation dentistry or something like that we can actually work on. So if my friends can help me put that in the form of a motion, I'm all for it.
And I might add that we did increase the hospital fee last year. I don't remember what the amounts were, but we did increase them where it was easier to get into a hospital room to provide this. But it still seems to me like it would be cheaper in a mobile setting than it would be in a hospital. Representative Reeves.
And I think there's a need for both because there are some people that will not be able to, because due to their behaviors, that may not be able to be managed through the mobile, but can be in a hospital.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing that up because I actually had that on my list as well. So I know there's been this discussion about having the standard billing code. I'm just curious as to whether, if that's not possible, should we ask the KDHE to look at having a standard reimbursement fee for this service? There was a recommendation. I mean, there was an amount of funding that was mentioned for each service to be provided, and that might address it as well.
Christine, would you like to, sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, Christine Osterlin, Deputy Secretary. So a couple things on codes. So codes, depending which type of code it is, it could be the American Medical Association that does the code, which of course we would have no influence on. HCPCS codes are done by CMS. So again, if it is under a CMS, I can't remember now, to be honest, off the top of my head, if the code for sedation dentistry is CMS or outside of CMS, but we can check into that and we'd be happy to send a letter encouraging them to create a sedation dentistry. And then on to the other point, in lieu of not having a code that is specific to sedation mobile dentistry, we can increase our current code slightly. I shared that yesterday. It's a small amount. Obviously, it would be probably with the modifier somewhere between $300 and $400, which is significantly less than what they wanted. And then if the legislature wanted to do some state-only funding to try to make up some of that difference, we could do a state-only code, which we would limit to just these certain types of providers, but that would have to be state funds only until the code structure catches up.
Representative Ballard.
No, I had this one down, and I think what he really wanted was the standard code. You know, when he mentioned yesterday for qualified anesthesia. And
Yeah,
so,
he wants to be able to bill G0330. He cannot. G0330, you have to be licensed as a facility to be able to be eligible to bill for that code. They are not a facility. They can't be licensed as a facility. And that's a CMS regulation under provider enrollment. So we don't have, again, we could do it state funded only. If you get into state funds, to be honest, we have all the flexibility in the world. It's just if you want federal match, we have to follow the federal guidelines. And that's the challenge there is they don't meet the qualifications to get themselves licensed as a facility.
gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So just for clarification, Senator Petty.
So thank you for that clarification. I think that helps a lot. So could we have a two-part recommendation then? One, dealing with the billing code, or because you mentioned that could move forward, but that takes time. And the second one, looking for, recommending that then, as we're waiting for that process to occur, that there's state funded only for our state funding. Say that again, Christy. It's a, it should be.
We would do a state-funded code only where we would limit it to mobile sedation providers, and whatever you would appropriate then would help fill that gap for them. We could do a small increase on the overall code, and if you wanted us to look at what the fiscal, if we did the 37, I think, on the code and the modifier of 300, we could come up with a fiscal for that so you could see the differential. It would bring that 15 million down a little bit. I mean, not tremendously, but I know everything helps when you're talking state general funds. But yes, we could do a combination.
Well, I would like to see us raise it by the modifier that you're talking about, the 300 or 400. At this point in time, not knowing what the fiscal note is, I would probably not support state-funded. And committee, you can weigh in, but I wouldn't support state-funded by itself. I have no idea. Do you have any idea how many sedation dentistry event activities happen?
Well, in my presentation yesterday, and I think all funds, for the state general fund, it was 15 million, and that is what it would cost us to fund just sedation mobile dentistry providers we actually priced it at 1,900. I know yesterday in their testimony, they mentioned 2,900. So that 15 million that I presented of state general funds would be to reimburse mobile sedation dentistry providers only at $1,900 per service.
15 million state funds.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a pretty big chunk. That's what I would suggest.
Yep. Yeah, and we can still send the letter. So we'll get a fiscal together for adding the modifier, which again will be some level of increase for them. We'll get a fiscal for that, and then yes, we could send a letter encouraging a code creation.
Is that your motion? Ready?
Recommend that KDHE and/or KDADS to request a billing code from CMS specifically for sedation dentistry mobile providers, and if a code is not available and during the pending of the CMS code, to standardize a billing fee for the service to be provided through available federal match modifiers.
Is the maker okay with that? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Back on recommendations. Representative Reeves.
We heard also from the ombudsman regarding the personal needs allowance. And I'm trying to pull up her testimony so I can get the numbers right. I believe the current personal allowance in Kansas is $62. And so there was, she showed us the rates for all of the other states. And it looks like, according to Senator Erickson, I think you said we're probably somewhere in the middle. I think you made a quick calculation. We're somewhere in the middle of that. And without really looking at a fiscal note for that, I'm wondering if we just look at a cost of living allowance to the $62 that's there now, instead of raising it and then saying that there would be a cost of living allowance to it.
So you're saying
my
leave it at $62 just at a cost of living?
Yes, that would be my
increase to it.
recommendation.
Okay. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do think we need to look at that. I would almost go the opposite way and raise it without a COLA and then revisit it every few years, because if you do the calculations with a COLA, we would be over $100. If we'd have had a COLA adjustment on our current 62, in 10 years would be over $100. And so I don't know that, I think we just need, I'm for raising it to the 72 without a COLA, but revisit it to make sure we're keeping up with the national average.
Thank you for that. Well, does anybody have the fiscal note on that, just raising it $10? I think it was. Senator Penny.
Are we talking about the personal needs allowance?
Right.
But and you're talking about, I thought it's now $26. And the average is $71. Okay, I must have changed my numbers there.
Well, my deal is, we're average right now. We're right in the middle, 25th. I just think that's a good place for Kansas to be. Right. But we rank 25th, so I don't think we're, out of line being at 25. I mean, $62. I have no problem with raising it, but I would like to know the fiscal note on that.
Should be fairly easy if we know how many. It's raising it $10. I thought I saw that number in testimony.
And I've received a text from Senator Gossage that she's not in favor of raising it either. Well, we have, 20,000 folks in nursing home on Medicaid. So, a couple million. That'd be pretty cheap. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree with you either. I'd rather look at it as needed. Brad, do you have any numbers for us? Okay. 1.2 million.
Oh, 1.2. Wow, my math was way off. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured it was over 1 million, but yeah, okay. Representative Ruiz,
I liked Senator Erickson's recommendation.
okay. So would you restate your recommendation?
I'll try. I recommend that we raise the personal needs allowance from $62 to $72.89.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Ballard. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, discussion? Sure, of course.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this raise is state money only because these are Medicaid recipients, or would it be some federal money?
I think it would be a split, 60-40 or whatever our new rate is, but somebody, that's the way I would look at it. It's Medicaid. Yeah, so it would be a split. So it'd be 500,000 for us and 700,000 for the feds.
So the 1.2 is the 60-40 match.
Right.
But it's still $500,000.
Right. And 700,000 to the feds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Roughly. I haven't started figuring with the new perm rate, or the, not perm rate, but the new FMAP rate. So we're up a little bit, so we're getting a better deal from the feds, close to 65-35 now.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Peck.
So as a recommendation, this is simply a recommendation to the legislature that the increase be made, how, so it still is subject to appropriations?
Yes. Yes, these are just recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If the Appropriations Committee sees fit, then fine. If not, fine too. Senator Gossage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think what we have to be careful about is when you look at averages and you're averaging each state pays X, you're going to have some states that pay $300 and they're going to be the outlier. So then when you take an average, but when you put them in the median form, as we talked about, we're right smack in the middle where it just makes more sense where we are right now. I think it's wise to review it every year, but to go with an average, which is where that $72 came from, I don't think is a wise move. I think we're in the middle. That's where we need to be, and that we leave it right there, and then we can review it each year. That's my opinion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign? No. Chairs in doubt. All in favor say aye. Raise your right hand. Noes, raise your right hand. Motion fails. Senator Gossage, you did vote no, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Motion fails. Back on recommendations. Senator Gossage? Senator Gossage, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Elizabeth told me you had your hand up. Okay. Do you have your hand up or? Okay, back on recommendations. Senator Petty.
Well, I'm going to mention this, but I'm not, and maybe maybe my notes aren't as complete as they should be. And this has to do with oral health. Yesterday, we right now only have 49 dentists in the state that work with our safety net clinics. And so I would like to see us at least mention the fact that we want to look at how we can increase the funding rate to incentivize dentists to provide services. It's a recommendation that we can discuss.
Recommendation, second. Committee discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we have spent a lot of money trying to make sure that we're providing dental services and, you know, anywhere from the dentures to root canals. And last year, finally, well, 2 years ago, I should say, just your regular checkups. And I think she did mention the 49 mentioned because it came from Tanya Dorf-Bruner. And at one point, she just kind of mentioned this might cost 30 million, but I think we just need to acknowledge the fact that we need to have more dentists because some of the most vulnerable people are not really covered extensively for dental work. And it may or may not be part of a package that they have with RMCO. So I think anything we can do, because we also know, and we heard this unfortunate story also, that by letting a dental problem just exist, that people can die. And that's more the extreme, I think, because it, you know, it affects it. But I think anything we can do to continue with the good work we have done for dental work to make sure that we're doing a lot of the preventive work. We don't have to carry the more expensive kinds of things that happen. That's why I'm in favor of it, and I would have made that recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any other questions? And I think so too, but I think we've put a lot of money into the dental over the last few years, I know. And it doesn't seem like it's making a lot of difference if we've only still have 49 providers. I mean, Tanya, do you have any insight in that? Yeah. And I know last year there was a committee recommendation about 30 million or something like that. I can't remember what it was.
I can share just a little bit more background. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya Dorf-Bruner with Oral Health Kansas. You have put a lot of money into this program over the last 5-6 years, a lot. The bulk of it honestly went to just getting dental benefits in place for adults. And so that's tremendous. About 15% of adults covered by Medicaid in 2024 did receive care. So that's something. When you're kind of looking at your benchmarks, I'm sorry to say benchmarks are hoping to get to close to 30. So we're, 15 is something. We're getting there. When I said 49 dentists, those are dentists that practice in safety net clinics, FQHCs, and lookalikes. And sometimes we think about those locations as where most people are going to get their dental care or medical care, because for people who are low income. And so I point that out only to say there's not a lot of capacity in that system. And the capacity that we need to build has to be in the private sector. There are, I don't have the number right in front of me, but it's around 400 and change dentists total enrolled in Medicaid. That's about 25% of the dentists in the state. So most of the dentists providing Medicaid services are not in safety net clinics, but we just need to really increase that capacity. When you've got 25% of dentists enrolled, I think it's only 19% are seeing over 100 people a year. No, over 10 people a year, over 10 people a year. So that's what we're talking about, is essentially is working on the rates some more is going to help incentivize more dentists to see a few more people. And if we just keep doing a few more and a few more, we're going to start to make more of a dent. So that's where those numbers come from.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thank
Committee
you.
questions? Seeing none, thank you. So I have a motion and a second. Did you have an amount in your motion?
I did not. The amount, and you can tell me if I'm correct, concerning that 30 million, was that 11.1 was from SGF funds. And that was to raise the Medicaid dental rate. To incentivize more dentists to participate with Medicaid, taking Medicaid patients across the state of Kansas with dental services.
Very good. Committee, further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion fails. Back on recommendations. Is that your hand raised, Representative Reese? Okay. Representative Reese.
I would like to recommend that we fund an additional 500 slots for the IDD waiver.
Second by Representative Ballard. Committee discussion. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I'm recalling correctly, the last 2 years we have had added 500 per year new. Is that correct?
It's not quite correct. We split that last year, 250, and the other, the money, I think it was 4 million or something like that. I'm not sure. I think it was $8 million cost. And I'm just guessing here. So, but I think it was about 8 million for 500 slots, but we ended up splitting it, doing 250 slots and 250 for rate increases for the ID and DD providers. Or that money went to, so it was split. So the original recommendation was 500 and it went to 250 and they got the same amount of money, it was $8 million, but it was 250 slots and the rest of it went to rate increase.
That was the most recent budget.
Yeah, that was last year's.
Previous year's budget, we had also added.
500.
Okay.
The previous year.
Over the last 2 years, we've added funding for 750.
Right.
On the IDD. Okay.
Right.
So this recommendations to add 500 and the approximate fiscal note would be 8 million.
Well, that's what I remember last year now, and that may be only SGF. I think it is just the SGF portion. If can somebody, can I phone a friend here somewhere? I don't see anybody. Brad? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are you done? But anyway, while we're waiting, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying to remember the discussion around that split. Wasn't there some issue with having enough providers to staff the 500 increase? And that's why we wanted to increase the pay so that we could encourage more people to become providers? I've slept since we had this discussion.
I think that was a concern from some of the House members on appropriations about capacity, and it is. I mean, it's a, but I also think that, you know, we have 5,000 people on a wait list, and we should try to eke that out as best we can. One of my recommendations here in just a little bit will be support for the continued support of this committee for the community support waiver, which will take, I believe, half the people off the wait list because it offers the 7 services versus the 14 that they currently get on the big waiver, I call it. So that's just my guess, but I haven't had anybody tell me I'm wrong. So it's a good guess.
you're the chairman. Who's going to tell you you're wrong?
Well, hopefully somebody does. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Seems like I remember as well that there's an issue with the processing, the amount they can process a year. You know, that we could give them 2,000 and they could only process 300 maybe. I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but they can't possibly do everything that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and it's all about capacity, quite frankly, that we can take care of these folks. But I do think it's something to continue to keep a fire underneath it to, you know, whittle down the wait list. So Representative Reeves.
I believe that the agencies, if they know that we're going to be a little consistent with this, you know, maybe we won't get 500 additional slots. Maybe it'll be, you know, the 250 like we got last year. But they can start anticipating that this is coming and they can build up, you know, their staff and be ready to accommodate more people coming off the wait list.
And there are a lot of efforts out there to increase capacity and various things, employment first, and just a whole bunch of things working. The disability organizations believe that we could have done 500. As a matter of fact, I think some of them were asking for 1,000 last year, but again, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know we've talked about a process where we would prioritize those with the most urgent, immediate needs on the wait list. Did we ever land anywhere on that? Because to me, that I would like to see a process where those with the most urgent, immediate needs, and not just first come, first serve based on how long you've been on the wait list. To me, that makes sense. If we're truly looking at meeting individual needs, that needs to be part of the process as well. So those that need it the most immediate get it sooner rather than later. So where did we land on? Did we take any action? I can't recall, Mr. Chair.
That was a recommendation from the interim committee that we met, and so we could bring that on here. That was one of our recommendations, to have KDADs establish some kind of a database. I think you heard a little bit of testimony about that yesterday, but that committee recommendation will come from the recommendation that we had on, because that's kind of what we've been on so many interims and stuff. We've got these interims and these recommendations are kind of coming from, you know, that interim or whatever, but that was part of the recommendation from the interim that we had last
My
week.
apologies, Mr. Chair. I can't keep all of
Oh, I can't either.
meetings and what happens where straight. Thank you.
But I don't have a problem. I think it's a good thing to add the weight of this committee to that recommendation when it comes out from the interim and I think we did give KDAD some deadlines. Is that the way I remember it, about coming up with a plan by the end of the year or something? Is that what you remember?
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Representative Bueller.
We had a project timeline for compliance with CMS, which included conflict of interest, targeted case management. That's, I believe, the project management you're talking about. We also talked about increasing day services from 25 to 40 hours a week, move cautiously with unbundling, wait list and data management, I think is what you're talking about, Senator. There was a portal for the CDDOs and KDADs. On targeted case management, we were talking about inclusion of the frontier exclusion for the only willing and qualified entity, and then the ACRE accreditation, I think, were the big ones from that interim committee.
So if we want to add that to this committee, or do we want to just keep that as recommendations from the interim committee? I'm totally up.
I think I'm okay as long as we know that we're working toward that. I don't know that we need to duplicate that recommendation. I just want to make sure that we had taken a recommendation somewhere on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee further discussion. Representative Reeves.
Was the funding the 500 additional slots, was that part of the recommendations? I don't remember it being there. Okay. So this would be on top of that.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you want to read back what we have before us?
Sure. I just want to clarify. So I have recommend that an additional 500 slots be funded for the IDD waiver did you want to add with an emphasis on those with urgent, immediate needs?
I don't think we have any way of finding that out right now, so I don't think that should be added.
So it would just
Yeah. Yeah,
recommend that an additional 500 slots be funded for the IDD waiver.
correct. Was that okay with the maker and the second? Okay, we have a motion. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. I do have a motion about the community support waiver, just a continued support of the community support waiver. I thought it would be done by now, and we're now looking at maybe submitting the application by the end of the year. And I just keep, yeah, I hope I get to see it before I die. So, but anyway, I do think we should, the recommendation should be continued support for the community support waiver. And there's already money in the budget for it and all that kind of stuff. So that's my motion. I am. And I have a second by Representative Ballard. Discussion committee. Representative Ballard.
You know, it's unfortunate. I don't know really why it's taking so much time, especially since we have talked about it a lot. And I'll just use my own constituents. I've been kind of talking about it, saying, gee, help is coming, help is coming, help is coming. And yes, we have raised some slots and everything else, but, you know, it's not just us, I imagine. I'm sure it's CMS and everyone else, but it really is a little disheartening. I think especially, I'm thinking about yesterday, the person we had, Perry Spencer, who spoke, because she came under Whitney Downing, and he's 3 years on it, and he was a young, well, he appeared to be a young person, and he's on the ID waiver. And what we're looking for is just trying to give them some help so that they're not on 8 years or longer. And it's just unfortunate that it just all takes so long, because people need this kind of help, and they're just not getting it. So I'm happy to second it and hope we can move faster and move CMS faster and do whatever we can. It would be nice to see it in our lifetime. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Senator Gossage, how did you vote on that?
I voted aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Okay, back on recommendations committee. I'm fine. Seeing none, what else do we have on our list? A drafting break for KLRD to prepare draft recommendations for committee review. It sounds like 15 minutes, or
We don't need it. We've done that as a. Yeah, we've done it.
okay. So we don't need any time. Okay. Well, would it be too much to ask if you would read them back to us so we'd?
Sure. The only one I still need to work on is the one with Representative Sutton to make sure that I have the right group. HCBS waiver? Okay. Okay. So recommend that the January meeting be scheduled for January 23rd, 2026. Recommend that a bill be introduced in the Senate regarding KSA 39-7, 106 to remove reference the April meeting has to be held during the regular legislative session. that a complex wheelchair slash DME work group be formed and report back to this committee in January 2026 to provide at minimum an analysis of the preventative maintenance slash safety check process and an analysis of the billing process. Recommend the right to a pharmacist of the resident's choice, irrespective of the type of medication distribution system used by the facility, and to not be charged a fee or receive a financial incentive or disincentive for choosing a pharmacy other than the facility's preferred pharmacy. The resident may not be charged for repackaging if that cost can be included on the facility cost report. Recommendation to the governor, subject to LCC Policy 33, to include the chair, vice chair, and ranking minority member of the Bethel Committee in the Kansas Rural Health Innovation Alliance before stakeholder recommendations are sent to the governor for the application process and any future committees created for funding distribution. A recommendation to commend KDADS regarding the HCBS waiver. Recommendation that an informational hearing on the availability and or current use of AI health technology be held during the session in Health and Human Services Committee. Recommend that KSA 39-947 subsection A be amended to create an independent surveying process and the creation of a committee of 7 members. Recommend that the 2026 legislation through review of, recommend that the 2026 legislative session review House Bill 2386 to remove this year-specific language regarding the federal poverty level for eligibility for the CHIP program. Recommend that KDHE and or KDADS to request a billing code from CMS specifically for sedation dentistry mobile providers, and if a code is not available and during the pendency of the CMS code process, to standardize a billing fee for this service to be provided through available federal match modifiers. Recommend that an additional 500 slots be funded for the IDD waiver, and recommend that there be continued support for the community support waiver.
Committee, does that sound? Representative Ballard.
Yes. We did a lot of work this morning. I just looked at something that I really want to bring up. Yesterday, someone mentioned about the autism waiver, and that maybe we're going to switch it over to IDD or whatever. Could we make a statement about that, or is that something that's publicly out there for people to know?
Is there someone from KDADS that can answer that? Lee?
Lee Keck with KDADS. I'm not going to give you the best answer. I know that that is something that has been discussed. When we originally started talking about the community support waiver, there was discussion about kind of transitioning that autism waiver and rolling it into the community support waiver. I don't think any decision has been made about that. We've had discussion with stakeholder groups about it. The autism waiver, I don't have the numbers on my head, but it was in testimony yesterday, does not serve a lot of people. Because there's the age limit on it. So I don't have any definitive answers for you right now, but if you wanted to make a committee statement about it, it's something we could discuss at the January meeting as well.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is because over the years, this has been a real hot topic. And I think roughly, I wish I remember, but it seems like we have like 128 or whatever that are actually 65 that's on it, but because he brought it up yesterday, that says that's going to be floating around, that, oh, they're going to stop our autism waiver, they're going to stop our autism waiver, and I just wanted to know, was there any validity to that, or should we prepare people for the individuals, what it is, because we don't have that many on to begin with, but we know that autism is increasing, all the time. And so people will panic if they think we're going to eliminate that that waiver for them when there's so few. So, I mean, do we take it, do we stop it because there's so few on it? But it's not in numbers, it's just that we're not financing it. And I'm just trying to get us ahead of it. It doesn't look as if, well, we'll just dispense with that and put you someplace else when this is a huge problem in the United States.
I think there's a list on that of 400 or 500 on the autism waiver. Also, I'm not sure that it's doing away with it, but it's moving it into, I mean, it's only 0 to 5, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the criteria. If I'm not mistaken, it's 0 to 5 is, and then you go on something else. That's the way I remember it. But let's just hold off on that and get more information from the January meeting. How about that?
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Elizabeth, can you kind of flag that so that we can get more information on that on the, okay, committee, you've heard our recommendations. Everybody okay with that? Everybody cool? Very good. Well, seeing none, thank you, everybody, for the impromptu calling you out for answers and things like that. Committee, thank you so much for your recommendations and your participation for the last couple of days. Thank you, Chairman Gossage. Get better. And with that, we're adjourned.